Fear of the Free Child is a weekly podcast that centers
diverse narratives, insightful commentary,
learning with our children and deschooling ourselves,
owning our multiple identities and treating children with dignity,
creating community and sharing conversation from often silenced spaces,
breathing life into liberation practices proactively and on purpose.
It's about parenting. It's about self-directed education, loving. It's about learning, liberatory practices,
defining love for ourselves and giving our love to as much of the world as it can possibly contain.
Let's find each other. Let's support each other. All of these stories are important and should be shared. Peace and welcome to another episode of Fear of the Free Child podcast. I have a great conversation for you, and just like with my call with Kaylin, there's a video version as well, so be sure to head over to the show notes page, akilahsrichards.com/VA for Veronica Ashley, who is this week's guest. Veronica is currently going through her own deschooling and unschooling process. You know, I love me some adult unschoolers. This conversation is after Veronica spent a couple of days with Marley and Sage, Chris's and my daughters. Veronica is Auntie Veronica in our village. My brother Jared and her are a couple. They boot up, as Jared would say. And they spent a couple of days with her before we left Atlanta. And so as Veronica is going through her own process of just kind of deschooling herself and creating a supportive community to help other women who are deschooling and unschooling from being in trapped spaces. She was in the military for like 10 years and has all of these really rich experiences around ownership of self and being, you know, the feeling of being owned by others and what undoing and unlearning those processes look like. We're very excited about this episode. Also, speaking of really dope women who are doing interesting things, I'm not going to share any specifics yet, but I am co-exploring a project with another self-directed education-minded woman who created a group that I'm interested in helping to create more space for Black and Brown children, specifically those of white parents, to connect in culturally relevant spaces. That's an ongoing issue, and I'm constantly being made more and more keenly aware that a lot of white people who parent children of color struggle to find and feel comfortable in spaces that may offer their children the cultural and identity-centered connections that the parents can't provide. So this woman and I, who are co-exploring this option, it sounds so weird and like covert, right? I'm just not sharing details like names yet because we're not sure where it'll go. And I want to really collaborate with her more on how we share it outside of this initial one. Okay. So, for now, what I want you to do is go over to the show notes page because I'll have a link to a survey. And the survey is meant for young people who are being raised by white people, so children of color or young people of color who are being raised by white people. We want to get some questions answered, just a few questions. I think there may be 7 about your particular experiences and some of the needs that you have so we can support parents and young people in creating these spaces that they need for culture and identity. So again, the show notes page is akilahsrichards.com/VA. The link to the survey will be there. And also the link to the video version of this episode will be there as well. I am also super excited to share that I'll be hosting a self-directed education workshop focused on unschooling in particular here in Johannesburg next Tuesday at the Reimagine Learning Center, which is an unschooling learning type space that's here in Joburg. It's actually right outside of Joburg. So Zakia Ishmael, who is one of the women responsible for producing South Africa's first self-directed education conference, she and I are partnering up to do this workshop. Shout out to Zakia and shout out to Shivani and all of those folks over there at the Reimagine Learning Center who are going to offer up the space for us to connect and communicate and share with some other SDE-minded folks here in and around Joburg. So that information will be on my Facebook page facebook.com/radical selfie. And I'll also put a link to it on the show notes page. So if you're listening from in or near Joburg, would love to see you next Tuesday morning at Reimagine Learning Center in Troyville. Get the details on Facebook or the link on the show notes page. So let's get into the conversation with Veronica talking about unschooling herself as a grown-ass woman and some of the insights that she got from spending a couple of days with Marley and Sage.
Hi, Veronica.
Hello, everyone.
What's dope about having Veronica on in this medium is that she's also a guest this season talking about her own deschooling journey, her own journey towards decolonizing her mind and really just having a fuller ownership of herself and fuller understanding of herself. So my girls, Marley and Sage, recently spent a couple days with Veronica. And you kept saying, you were like, oh man, I just needed like a camera person to be recording this experience. So I thought it would be good to just come on, and because so many people are, I think, really curious about what unschoolers do or how they get down or what a day might look like, I thought, especially with Veronica, she's an eventual mom. And she's in a space where she's not around children all the time, but she has enough experience with them, and you'll hear how in season 2 as you listen in. So I think she could bring a really interesting perspective, both from her background and kind of where she is at now in her journey about hanging with the girls. Yeah.
So they came over with the idea that we were going to explore some new areas and plan for their restaurant, because that's what they wanted to do. They're going to host a restaurant.
Yes.
And so between Akilah, their mom, and the girls, they came up with, and they have other partners. Actually, they have business partners, which is awesome at that age. Like, they have business partners that they consult with. And they came up with a menu as well as a shopping list and all these things that's needed for a restaurant. So for me, with children, they always have, what I've seen, they always have their own idea, not always what our idea is. Most times it gets us to the same exact place, not the same route. Not to say that their route is better or easier or harder, but it's their route. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of what I've been learning. Like, not so much of telling them where to go, but just clarifying where they're trying to get to, and just let them explore their options of how to get there and their route, and creating it, because they will. As adults, we a lot of times invade in the learning process, and I wasn't there. I didn't feel like I was there to teach them, because learning is going to happen.
Exactly.
I said, hey, here's our budget. You have your list. I have the money. Literally, I handed them my card, gave them the PIN number, and I was like, this is your budget. You can get a calculator out, or you can write it down however you want to. You should budget and make sure you don't go over this amount. And if you have leftovers, then we can even explore more options of getting more things. But they took their list, and they took that amount, and they went through their list. And I kind of want to explore a little bit before we actually got to the shopping part, because this was the part that I guess amused me the most. Mm-hmm. I said, hey, and I had like a million things planned, but I wanted to open the floor for what they wanted to do, because for me, I had experienced those things, and not that they wouldn't, but it needed to be organic enough for them to accept it and learn the fullest, in my opinion. So I said, hey, we have a couple options. We can purchase lunch or dinner or breakfast once today. Do you want to go downtown and find somewhere to eat? Or did you want to go, right up the street where we know the food is good and it's the food that you like and we've had it? We can do that. And they said, well, we're going to go downtown. We had no plan. We just had a time frame. I said, traffic gets bad at 4:30. This means that no matter what time we get to the farmer's market, we will be back on the road by 4:30.
Yeah.
And we budgeted time, and we went downtown, and we parked in a safe space. And at that point, I said, hey, where are we going? And I didn't say, we have options. Where are we going?
Right.
And
you didn't need to put anything out in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Not at all. I didn't need to coerce them into a way of where I was trying to get. Where are we going? I want to know if you have a plan.
Yeah.
And tell me if you need me help with your plan. That's it. They said, we want to go to, I think it was called Gus' Famous Fried Chicken. I had never heard of it. Never heard of it ever. I don't even think it's originally from here, but maybe they had experienced it before. and they said, we want to go to Gus Fried Chicken. And I said, all right, so do you want to
Sorry, your video is moving a lot. Mm-hmm.
What about, I had it balanced on my hand. What about now?
Yep.
Okay. So I said, do you want to map quest it? And they was like, no, we've been here before. And I was like, all right, no problem. And we explored a little bit downtown, walked down through the city, down by the parks. And they said, well, we've been walking for a while, but this doesn't look like it. And I was like, I truly don't know. So what we find, we're going to truly find.
Yeah.
And eventually they had a guide or something walking around the park, and we asked the guy, where is this place? I had never heard of it. He said, yeah, it's in the mall up the street. And the girls, and I said, hey, listen to him. I'm not listening to him. Listen to him for directions. I'm here to make sure you guys are safe and to make sure you guys get to where you need to go, and all the things that you need are there. But I want this to be a fun trip, and I want this to be a learning experience for you guys. Even if it's the smallest part of just navigating safely through the city.
Yeah.
All the way to...
And that's such a major one, to me.
Yeah.
Like, that's not small. I'm still learning those skills at 39 years old. So It's wonderful to be able to practice. So can you imagine if when you're sitting in the car as a 5-6-year-old going wherever, or walking with your family member, that if we took the approach of being like, just stay over here so you don't get hit by a car.
Yeah.
If we take the approach like, okay, what's that? If they can't read yet with the words, oh, we always pass this particular tree. There goes this blue house here. These are some of the ways that we can start to recognize how learning happens outside of a schooled environment. And that's a part of why this conversation is so important, because I'm hoping that it's really painting a picture of how we don't really need to identify opportunities to learn. We just need to get much better at seeing how learning is happening.
Absolutely. And for the girls, you said, to be able to pick out things at 5 and 6, I can absolutely see that had happened with them, because they were able to recognize different things. Like I shared a picture of the Lego logo guy. Mm-hmm. And they were like, we've been here at, when we were younger.
Yeah.
And from there, they were able to build where we were actually trying to go. To the restaurant, which was in the mall, which was literally in the middle of the city. So absolutely, they were able to recognize things, not necessarily streets, because at most points we didn't necessarily read street signs, while we did for major streets and intersections. That wasn't the key point. The key point was being able to, one, follow the directions that they verbally had heard, mm-hmm. not per something they read or something that they were super familiar with, but simple directions.
Yeah.
They comprehended it. They translated it into what they needed it to be. And then they followed it and created their own path. And we got there just fine in perfect timing. So we had, and even then we explored options. They asked questions to the restaurant person, the waiter. She came out and took our order. And they asked questions that I wouldn't even have, I guess, maybe thought to ask about how long it would take. And we learned things about the restaurant and where it originated and all different things. Even in that, I enjoyed it because I got to learn so much.
Yeah.
And I keep talking about what I was able to learn, but unschooling and learning has no age.
Yep.
It has no face. It has no time.
Yes, it has no
restraint.
boxes at all, which is
nothing.
What's so great about it, because you even say you'll have and this is so good, because then we can really develop a more nuanced understanding of self-directed education. Because I know I had one woman recently say, and it's so funny, it came up a couple times recently, but one woman said, I don't think we unschool because my son likes structure. He likes to do this at this time, this and that time, this and that time. Yeah, but are you allowing him to do it at that time? Is that time based on him or you? During that time, is he doing what he wants to do? Does he have the option of doing nothing? If so, then that is unschooling. All it means is that you're just designing exactly the environment that is unique to you, and that you're willing to be fluid about, just opening up the space for learning and exploration wherever you are with whoever's around. That's all it means.
Absolutely. And I'm so glad you said that about the structure, because I'm a structured kind of person. I don't have to know what I'm doing within that hour, but I need to know that hour is dedicated for this.
Yeah.
So that for me was a small struggle, because I didn't feel like that was the same thing, but truly, like you said, it is. It's not even structure. It's just framing your time. That's it. It's not it, because I don't want to paint that picture. I don't want to know exactly what I'm doing. I don't want to.
It's not the military, which
it's
you're
not
very familiar with, right?
Absolutely. I don't want 5 minutes. You got this time.
Yeah.
No, we're going to start this and we're going to feel it and we're going to work through it and we're going to go from there. And then at this time, because sometimes you do put times on it, but it's not so like it's. I just feel like structured is just such a strong word.
Yeah, it definitely
when it comes
has
to learning.
this connotation of rigidity and also coercion. As you mentioned the word coercion before, coerce. That is what we identify with discipline, and it's also what we connect with success. Of course, you need to have structure for success, but then all the time when we say things like structure can come out of flow. For me, structure comes out of flow. I have my calendar for the week for what, meetings need, all the things that are not just me centered, but as an entrepreneur and primarily a solopreneur, a lot of things are centered on me. So I do have a lot of control of my time. That's why I transitioned to this lifestyle, because I need that. For me, structure, a part of my personal structure, I call it my personal ecology, my connectedness to all of the things that create my environment internally and externally. A part of how I thrive in my ecology is not needing to wake up at a certain time. And of course, we're trained that obviously you want to wake up as early as possible. And for many people, that's a constant struggle. And for other people, it's a great way for them to go about their day. But then you have those of us where, for me, I like to wake up slow and naturally, right? So when I have that 1 hour to wake up, to stretch, to meditate, to do all of these things, to touch Instagram or in Twitter before I get out of my bed, I get all of that stuff out of the way. Then that frees my mind to really focus on the things that are on my to-do list and say, all right, what am I doing at this time? As you said, this block of time is dedicated to this. I'm going to meal prep from this time to this time. I'm going to leave this block open to hang out with the girls or to see if there's any specific thing that they're doing right now as they're in the middle of learning so many things. I know when I can exercise that day. I know if it turns out that I won't get to do something that day. That is my structure, you know, so you get to define it instead of, as you said, where it's before, you're like, this is not so good. I wish I could be more like this, or, Yeah.
But you also mentioned the word discipline, and I want to point out that word simply because our understanding of discipline is not what discipline is. It's so far. It's like unschooling, entrepreneurship, all of these things, freedom of time, owning your time, all of these things require you to redefine a lot of different terms and to include discipline, because discipline is not so much of when, how, where you do things. It's just doing it.
Yes.
That's it. Like, I don't have to be
consistent with doing it.
Yeah,
that's the other
and that's
thing.
it. That's it. Just doing it and being consistent with that when you have a plan. And it's not that you have to be so structured to be disciplined.
Right. But then we end up struggling with that, because then we're like, why can't I just be more this instead of how am I and what is that conducive to? And that, for me, is a very schooled mindset, because school says, why can't you just get an A in every class every time?
Right.
That's what you need to do. Not factoring in anything besides the thing that validates you, the thing outside of you that validates you. Jobs that we're in, it's the same thing. If you can make this many widgets by this time, or if you can make your boss look good in this environment, this sort of thing. So these things play out into all aspects of our lives. And this is why, as we start to understand more about self-directed education, of which unschooling is one type, we can see how this is not so much just about kids or somebody's daddy or mama. Yeah, this is really about personal leadership.
Absolutely. And like I said, it doesn't have an age. It doesn't have anything. It doesn't have any type of framework either. It should exist. It does exist.
Yeah.
And if we allow it to exist on its own terms, it would be so beautiful.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's it. It would be beautiful. It's just crazy.
And we learn like that as entrepreneurs, as adults, even before we become entrepreneurs, or whether we do or don't. I know you're going through this now. You're learning new programs. I'm going to finally, oh my God, Final Cut Pro sometime this year. I'm about to dive into that. I learned a bunch of things just kind of from my own deep interest and sense of necessity. And I wasn't learning in a panic mode. No,
and it didn't have any rules or penalties or consequences. Like you said, I'm learning so much right now. WordPress. it has no consequences when you do it wrong or when you don't get it done in a certain time.
Right.
Learning is organic, and I learn how I want to learn, and the parts that I want to learn when I want to learn them. They all have to be learned, but it's based on how and where and when I want to do it.
Yeah.
But that still is learning. I can still at this point feel like I could teach it to someone else because
Exactly.
I've experienced it, I've learned, I've messed it up. I've tried it, I've went
and
back.
you've messed it up without some major consequence of someone
Right.
being like, you are wrong. Even if it means that, and I've certainly done this when I was learning WordPress, I didn't put something right and the form will show up, but it won't go to my email list. So I would lose subscribers or not even get them to begin with. I didn't die. No one died. I put something up on Facebook and let people know. And then they just went through the process again. Whereas in a setting that is so structured or, the typical idea of it, you're feeling bad. You're being compared to everybody else. Well, they got theirs right. What the hell wrong with you?
Pretty much.
And then that stays in our brain. And then this term this keeps coming up to me. We internalize our own degradation.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Pretty much.
Yeah.
And that's definitely what I didn't want to do with the girls. I wanted to provide them with, not even structure. I wanted to provide them with check-in points.
Mm-hmm.
It was just check-in points. Hey girls, it's 3:00. You want to go to the farmer's market, or we can do this another time. The $35 is yours.
Yeah.
The gas is mine. I'll take you. And if not, it's okay.
Yep.
It's okay. But if we want to use this time, we did say we want to, but if you don't, that's okay. I just want to make sure it's 3:00.
Yeah.
And of course, at no point did I ever feel like I was directing them or driving them.
Yeah.
Or even forcing them or making them do any of it. It was all driven by them.
Yeah.
And most times they would say, hey, I think it's time for us to go do this now.
Yeah,
or they would say, I'm
cognizant of
finished.
that. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. They was very conscious of the time. They watched the time. They were very conscious of how much they spent. They were very conscious. So we went to the farmer's market, give you a better idea. We went to the farmer's market. We picked up, I said, hey, there's no buggies inside. We put a buggy in. And they said, we want to get meats that we can freeze, and we want to get spices. And I was like, well, for $35, that's, you could do more.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she was like, well, nope, we can do it.
Oh, okay.
And
I get what you're saying.
they had money left over. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It wasn't that much. So I said, hey, how much meat do you need? And she says, well, in these containers that we buy, she was referring to the containers in the grocery store, which are normally about £1 each. Mm-hmm. And she says, in those containers, we can get about 4 or 5 burgers.
Who was this?
Marley.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And I said, okay, Marley. So with that being said, that container is £1. At the farmer's market, we don't have that luxury of picking up a container. You have to tell him how much you want. So you calculate. You told me that one container is 4 to 5 burgers. And I told you that one container is £1. Mm-hmm. How many pounds do you want?
Yep. Just real life shit.
Real life shit that you can apply. Mm-hmm. I'm not talking about A plus B equals DX. I don't know. But
please, let's not.
No, I was like, this is what this is, and this is what this is, and you figure out the middle.
Yeah.
No consequences. Only consequence is that you have to go back to the grocery store.
That's right.
That's it.
Right.
Nothing else.
And it removes the label, because when you say math, for some people that has a negative connotation. But if you're just talking about but if you're just saying, how do you feed 20 people? Because I noticed the same thing with Sage. Marley used to be really into math when she was in elementary school. And I think she still is. She just doesn't call it that anymore. And we also don't do it in the same way, right? Mm-hmm. Like she was like workbooks and like she was really, really into it. Sage has never been into math, but she's always been into cooking and baking, especially baking. So like those things, the fractions and all of these different things, and being able to quickly gauge how, to these calculations, she can do them. But she'll tell you in a minute she can't stand math, but she does a lot of mathematical type things because it's the real life application of it that connects her to it, and not this idea that if you don't know these things, you can't just pull out your phone. You don't even need to have a calculator, not an abacus, nothing. No. You pull out your phone or your watch and you get the answer, and nothing is wrong with that.
Yeah. And I want to point out something really fast what you just said. I noticed that learning came from the parent, from you. You learned first your girls.
True that.
Learning has to happen on both ends. It's not just one-sided. And it's really important, but because for me, like I told you, I had to learn how to learn.
Yes.
But
Same
being a
here.
parent, you were able to do that. You said to me just now, Marley has been into math and Sage hasn't. I never noticed. Never probably would have, but
exactly.
that's important when it comes to unschooling, because you have to pay attention to those types of things in order to supply them with the things that they'll need to get those organic experiences.
Because you're a facilitator. So if you are not, aware, then how can you facilitate it? Then you become a hindrance, which is very much how we started out. I was very much like, okay, we unschooling, but I still need to know what you're doing every 17 minutes. And if it don't look like learning, I'm just going to give you something to do. Like that. We start out there, but this is why this is so great. Because I know for you as an eventual mom, you will now have this level of perspective to be able to make your own decisions. Whereas for so many of us, we never even heard of no shit like this. We never thought of it, but we knew what we dealt with. And we also know the things that we are having to deschool ourselves from and unlearn consistently as a result of not being taken seriously as young people.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're talking about just us as women, as mothers, but even the conversation with my partner, with your partner, it's not always on the same level. Like I'm interested in learning how you learn. That's not going to be the same for every partner. Learning to some people still has that negative connotation, like you said, and they don't see anything outside of that. So not only are we learning with our kids, you're learning with your spouse or your partner.
And
all of those things.
Together.
Yes.
Because it is that thing that you said, that negative connotation, that's trauma. That's what that is. We are all, and again, from your military experience, I know these are topics that you address all the time too in your tribe, in that space, and also with some books that you have coming up, which I'm so excited. We're going to have to talk about that too, where we internalize these things and then we figure out how to survive with them happening. So if you feel, for example, if you always felt like you were horrible at math, then you develop other ways to compensate for that. You might be
just cope with it.
Or you might be defensive in a space if something comes up, or you might have an anxiety around certain things. We learn how to cope with this trauma, essentially. Whereas this sort of thing, and I'm very glad that you brought in partnerships as a whole, and using the word partnership, because that's what Chris and I are. We do not own Marley and Sage. We're in partnership with them, and they are in partnership with us, and that looks like different things at different moments. But we are working really hard to center partnership, and a big part of that is understanding each other, and realizing that where our traumas lie and how not to project that trauma onto our relationships,
Absolutely. And it still goes back to the shopping trip that we did. I remember when I would go to the grocery store with my parents, or when they would send you to the grocery store and they would say, go get this. No exploration, no movement. You go get 2% milk and you come back with 59 cents worth of change and you go on about your day. No questions asked. 5 minutes. That's what you got. But with this, I felt that with that teaches people to follow directions and nothing else. That's it. That I can follow your command. I can execute.
Which is not really a skill.
It's almost teaching them to be more of an animal than like their own human
evolved.
Being.
Exactly.
Yeah. No. They don't teach them to evolve at all. And that's what we do to animals. We don't teach them to evolve. We teach them to pretty much just kind of coincide with us and do what we tell them to do. And that's not what we want to do. So I said, hey, I'm not going to tell them what size to get with their seasonings, what kind. They have their list. They have their money. Let's follow them and see where they go. So they went and they got containers big enough to, no matter how much they had to make, and keeping conscious of the time, not the time, but the price, because they wrote down the prices of each individual thing. So getting a large enough amount to make enough servings for 25 people. And that was the idea. So they came with amount of guests, They came with ingredients, and they came with an idea, a budget. They wanted to spend overall. And then they had contributions. And my time and gas and a couple dollars, that was our contribution. So I wanted to make sure that we used it to the fullest. And we did.
Yes. Oh my
and we
gosh.
did.
They didn't want to come back, y'all. Like 2 days later, when I was like, girls, what's a good time? Or I asked Veronica, what's a good time? She was like, the girls said never. And they're like, Mom, you're coming today. We discussed this. Yes.
Yes, absolutely. So we went, we spent about, I say we got 30 minutes. Hey man, we're about out of time. It's about 30 minutes till traffic. We got 30 minutes, and they went and got their seasonings, and then they got their meats. And then we headed back to our side of town, and they said, hey, so traffic's this way. Once we get back to your side of town, can we go to Party City to look at plates? And I'm like, oh man, I thought we were going home.
Right.
Like, but they were like, well, you said we were avoiding traffic, not being out, of course. So I'm like, yeah, you're right. We did say that. It ain't even 5 o'clock yet. So you got me. So we swung by, and we were driving and driving and driving. Martin said, where are we going? Because this didn't take us this long to get down here. And I was like, yeah, you say you want to go to Party City. Oh yeah, okay. Put a headphones back on, and we get to Party City.
Yeah.
We go through Party City, and we go to the plate aisle. And I want to kind of visit how strategic their thinking was. They thought about when they go to a restaurant, like how much food they get, how much food is on a plate. Like if someone was to pay you for a meal, how much would you feel comfortable giving them to where you felt comfortable taking their money?
Them discussing this, or they were discussing it with you as well.
Absolutely. So they picked up square plates, and I'll tell you, they picked up square plates, and they said, this is a large plate. And they said these things, this is a large plate. We could fit a lot of food on it. And then I believe Sage said, well, do we want to fit a lot of food on it, or do we want to get super small plates so we could fit a little bit of food on it? And I said, well, I think you guys both got the right idea, but what you want to do is find out what you're comfortable with, and then find a plate that fits what you're trying to do. So we searched a little bit more. We found square plates, rectangle plates, circle plates. We ended up with the rectangle plates, not only because of how the positioning of the food could go, but the price and how many they got for that price.
Nice.
As well as the coordinating dessert plates that were, and they thought about.
Oh. Uh-oh. I can't, you're frozen and I can't hear you.
Okay.
Hello?
It just came back.
Boom. Okay, there we go. Yeah, I don't know what happened. Yeah, so we're talking about, you remember where you left off? Okay, let me make sure it's still recording. Yes.
Okay, so they even looked at the size and how they would do the dessert plates. And it all turned out to be that they were able to get enough dessert plates as well as enough meal entree plates. And then we talked about, we started budgeting a little bit. We said, hey, we're running low on money. We have about $20 left. What we need if we were to buy enough for one each person, it would be about $30. And I was like, we're not going over budget. We just got to figure it out. We got to figure it out. This is how it works in a restaurant. Yeah. And I said, so let's think about options of how we could actually get away with purchasing 20 plates for 25 people. And I said, well, all right, is everybody coming at the same time? And she's like, I invited them at the same time, but realistically, they won't come at the same time. And I was like, so 20 plates might work. Yeah. And you have time to kind of work around that if not, right? And they said, yeah, of course. So let's do 20 plates. And then we'll go and see. I said, yeah, let's just save the $5 for them.
Right, because they got their money in installments, y'all. They got, right, because one investor gave at this time. And now we're actually here today picking up another round of investment. So we're going to be going to the supermarket with them after we leave here too.
And I loved telling other people about it. I was able to speak to my mom about it, and I said, hey, the girls, and I love telling people that have heard nothing of the sort.
I know you always tell me that. That's so funny to me.
Yeah, absolutely, because I love, she's amused and she's like, oh my God, it's foreign to her.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, yeah, last year they had a tea party.
Yeah.
And they spoke a different language. They hosted in a different language. One person was a translator. And I said they did the entire tea party. And she's like, really? And I was like, yeah. And this time they're doing.
Watched and facilitated just like this time. Yeah. And I mean,
and even learned ourselves.
Exactly. Always. We're always
Mm-hmm.
learning. So exactly. So these are just y'all ideas that they come up with for things they want to do because their birthdays are close together.
Mm-hmm.
And we're about to leave Georgia for a bit. So they wanted to do, they're really, really into, what's his name? Chef Gordon Ramsay. Is that his name? And
the Top Chef guy.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And like Kitchen Wars. They're really into that sort of stuff. So this is what this is. So they said they want to do a pop-up kitchen. And the restaurant is Indian. Is it Indian food with Southern flair or Southern food with Indian flair? I don't remember.
I think it's Southern food with the Indian flair.
Right. Based on the research, which they went with Chris to the bookstore, went into the section with, all the cookbooks and all these different things. And then they realized that they developed a pattern over the type of foods that they like. So they said, okay, this is what we want to do. They had a menu already, but once they made that realization, they scrapped the menu completely and then started over and then researched names that would give that right combination of what they were looking for. And that's how they came up with Satvana, because I think it means solace or something of the sorts. And, we just facilitated. We made sure they got to the bookstore. Chris took them to the bookstore and back. We made sure there was Wi-Fi so they could put the stuff in Evernote. That's it. You took them to the grocery store. You took them there. And then the next day, too, they went on tour with you as well on campus, I think.
Yes.
So we're just facilitating here. Yeah. And learning along the way, as you said.
Absolutely. And just like you said, it was just facilitating for the most part and making sure they were safe and making sure that they had the things that they needed to succeed. That's it. And success didn't look like what it looked like for me or for anybody else. It looked like what it looked like for them.
Yep.
And a lot of times they would say to each other, hey, we're going to start here because this is how much we have for now. Because they also understood that their investors were trickling in and not all at once. Mm-hmm. So they wanted to be sure. And this is what I comprehended. This isn't what they said, but this is what I comprehended from them. They understood that they wanted to stretch their money and not spend it all at once. While they could have spent it all and bought as much as they could, but they wanted to make sure that they were at least able to buy enough of each item to actually run a restaurant. And that's overhead.
Exactly.
That's called overhead.
Right. Let's put that label there. That's also called business management 101.
Business management.
There are all of these different things. Yeah. Again, but we don't need the labels when the actual thing is happening. Yeah. The labels are almost like the afterthought in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And it's not, the labels weren't for them and it weren't for me. It was for people that needed to comprehend that and learn that way, which is absolutely okay with that too, if that's what we need to do. Yeah. But for them, so they picked up all their things and we got all our items. And then for that day, because what my structure looked like for them was to accomplish some things as far as the restaurant went, explore some new things, learn some things. I wanted to learn some things about the city and I wanted them to learn some things about the city. Mm-hmm. And then that was it. Yeah. That was structure. And it wasn't, what are you guys doing after we finish this? And what are you, that was structure. You guys good? You're hungry? This is it. And this is what tomorrow looks like. Yes. I'm leaving at 10 o'clock. Yep. You have to have breakfast and you have to be ready, dressed, ready to go by this time. If not, we can't do these things. Yeah. Not that I'm not going.
Very late too. So absolutely. For them, it wasn't like they're not accustomed to somebody saying, go to bed at this time, or, even though we did that for many years, but once we stopped, they were like, don't even. So they, so they had to decide for themselves, okay, are we going to make sure we're going to be up in time to go with Auntie Veronica today? Yeah.
And right. And it was something that they desired to do. So that's why it's really important to me to allow learning to happen in a desired environment. Mm-hmm. Doing something that's not forced, because even if it's not a desired environment, if it's forced, it's going to be rejected for the most part. Yeah. And that's exactly not what we're trying to do. Yes. So I said, hey, I think at that time it was maybe 7 or 8. I usually go to bed about 11, 12, 1. And I said, whenever you guys go to bed, you go to bed. I'm going to get up at this time and I'm going to have breakfast, and then I'll see you guys at 10 if you're coming. And if not, I'll check in with you guys. And then if not, At 8:45, I peeped in the room, and Marley's like, she got 15 minutes. I'm going to wake her up in 15 minutes at 9 o'clock. And I was like, see, I didn't need to set an alarm for them.
Yeah.
I didn't need to tell them what time they needed to get up. And not to say that these things aren't, facilitated earlier in life, and they learn these things, but we allowed them to learn on their own terms.
Right.
And
it
see
was
that,
a rocky road, because I was definitely like, they are still not in bed, and we do it with screens. Like they can't be on the screens past a certain time. And that's just Chris and me recognizing that that is something that we think can be harmful, when it's excessive, both because of, they're in the dark and the thing on their eyes, and also just being able to be mindful of the things that are going on around you, which is hard to do when you're focused in. So even as unschoolers, unschooling doesn't mean unparenting. You still do those things, but you're doing it from a space of, okay, is this a control thing, or is this a partnership thing? And if it feels like a control thing, then I need to question it. And sometimes I question it, like with the screens thing, and I still come back to, nah, son, you're not going to be on the screens at 1 o'clock in the morning. And that's where we are right now, and that's okay. You know?
Absolutely, because not only are they learning on their terms, they're still, they're still growing adults. They're still children that's growing. So Uncle Jared said, I think he came down, he was like, all right, so y'all going to be in the bed by 1:30? And they looked up, and he's like, I'm just joking, but you guys you have a time to go to bed? And they acknowledged, and then that was it. And we came back and checked, and they were gone to bed at a decent time.
Yeah.
And when we got up, they were up and we were ready to go. And the next day we were able to explore the mountains of northern Georgia.
Yeah.
That was like
those beautiful pictures. Oh my God. They're on Instagram, y'all, on the Fair Free Child account. You need to go look.
Yes. And the pictures couldn't even capture the experience. I want to kind of give you guys a little bit of the insider of the experience. So we parked, and I want to go all the way down to the integrity part of it. The parks here in Georgia, it may be the same everywhere, but they don't have people manning the parks. They have a little box with envelopes that says parking is $5.
Yep.
And then that's it. And we were looking around, we're looking for this person. Nobody showed up, so we went to the box. And the box, I was like, it's probably a dog poop box. And they're like, no, let's go look at it. We check it out, and it's not. It's the pay box.
Yeah.
And I say, hey, I have $5. This is our last $5 in cash. And they say, yep, we're going to do it because of karma. And we want to put out the energy that we want to receive
Is that
back.
what they said? Yes.
Yeah, it was like, well, we have $5 and it's not hurting us to get $5. I was like, you're right. And we want to ride home and we want our truck to be here when we get back. So there's no question about that. You know what I'm saying? And just not trying to intimidate them and bully them into doing what we perceive as right.
Yeah.
But to allow them to decide what's right for them and why it's right for them.
Yeah.
Because that's really important when it comes to us doing things as adults.
And
not even as a child.
That. Yeah. And everybody watching and listening, we know that. All right.
Absolutely.
We totally know what it feels like to have to develop the skill of self-trust in adulthood and to be our own worst critics, to replace the voices that used to criticize us, even the most loving ones, the ones who loved us the most, that we realize that we replace them with our own voices, our own versions of them, even when we become adults and are separate from them. We know that. So this is a part of why that's so important too, because you get to not perpetuate that. And that's powerful for me. It's such a motivator when in those times where I would rather be like, yo, sit down, shut up, I'm tired, or because I said so, whatever.
Yeah.
That reminds me not to do that because of these consequences.
And not only that, Akilah, I'll tell you that even the sit down and the shut up, it might even come from outside experiences. Like for me in the military, loud noises don't work well with me. And it's not so much for control, but just for me and my peace. I just don't do a lot of loud things.
Yeah.
So even trusting the kids to understand when I tell, hey, you guys can play as much as you want.
Yeah.
But being loud with me doesn't work that way. And it comes even with this yelling or loud moving or booms or any of that thing. And trusting that they understood that and not, I guess, bullying them.
Right.
And so into
using your
the
position
brain.
of power.
Yeah, absolutely. Don't do this. No, this bothers me, and it makes it a lot easier for everybody if we don't do these things. If you want to, it's going to make it hard for me, But if you do them, then we'll have to just go there. But
and
hoping
see,
and trusting that
every kid won't adhere to that, you know, or
right.
won't. But the problem is not that. To me, the problem is that we assume that no kid will. So
right.
we treat every kid like we're supposed to be like, because
right.
we feel like they're not capable somehow of you just having a conversation with them like you would anybody else, because children are people. And that seems like such a, I don't know, maybe overly simplified statement, but children are people. Think about all of the ways that we really don't treat them like people. And then the consequence of that with dealing with all the assholes that we deal with all the time in the real world. Yeah, who are just oppressed, suppressed people who are living out their trauma over and over. Yeah.
And you spoke about I spoke about trusting them to understand, but we also have to trust them to know what they're talking about. Not that everything that they say is gold and solid, but they have at least an idea of what they're trying to get over to you. Mm-hmm. As we walk through the woods, we're walking and Marley's like, hey, we could go anywhere except for near the water. And I'm like, all right, there's a map. You tell us where we're going. And she's like, I don't do mosquitoes because I don't do well with whatever reasoning. And I said, I respect that. I respect that. And I'm saying, I respect that.
Right.
And I said, all right, we're still going to be outside. Pick and choose where you want to go.
Yeah.
So we found somewhere else to go. And then Say said, I don't want to be outside anymore. And I said, well.
You know, she says she's an outdoorsy person. She's like, I like looking outdoors.
And I was like, we got a perfect solution for that. Let's get in the car. We finna go sightseeing in the car. Let the windows down. Let's roll. So Marley looks up and I'm super amused, and I wish I could really portray how wonderful it was with them. We're down at the bottom of the mountain. No idea. We're not even trying to get to the top of the mountain. That wasn't even the idea. We just wanted to hike a trail and just kind of hang out there. Mm-hmm. Marley looks up and sees these guaranteed $2 million mansions. Mm-hmm. And literally looks up, straight up, and says, let's go up there. And I said, well, I'm pretty sure it's gated. And she's like, but what if it's not? And I said, well, if it's not, then we're going. I don't know what else. If we're going to be out, let's try. And we tried, and it was gated. And there's a number. Let's call it. Everybody knows, anybody knows that if you're outside of a house and a business and you have an issue, you call the number. We call the number, and I say, hey, we're going to be honest. We just want to go look at the house at the top of the hill. And I was like, yeah, sure, come on in. And he buzzed us in. And he was like, oh, by the way, I have another community across the street. It's like, all right, we're going to go look at houses. We drove literally up the hill, and it was one of the most, from there, they explored places that they wanted to live.
Yes, they
explored
sent pictures and audio. Yes. They were in their own world in that moment. It's like they were whisked off to some whole other space. Yeah.
Me too. I was there. I don't know where we were, but we were there.
Y'all were whisked off. Yes, yes.
Absolutely. And I was like, man, you know what the next trip is, right? I was like, we got to go look at houses and apartments, because real life says that you have to have somewhere to live no matter what that looks like. Right. And I don't want you to think that having a mortgage is the only option. And I don't want you to think that living in an apartment is the only option.
Because we talk about that.
Yes, absolutely. And just to be able to experience those things and learn the differences hands-on at that age is the most important. I could imagine how well equipped I would have been right now, because I feel like I'm super equipped now. But if I, at that age, was able to explore the options of what I wanted to do with my finances.
Yeah, if you were not just have the practice. A lot of the stuff is really not about being perfect at it. It's just and this is a term that I use a lot, being practiced. That's all it means. It just means that you are comfortable going down this road, that you are comfortable saying. I remember you talked about this, and y'all will hear it on the episode of the other episode of the podcast that Veronica's on, where we were talking about things like when you left the military and really just started to grow into yourself, your authentic self, and just exploring that and shedding the other stuff. One of the things was like, even like, where do you want to live? You know,
Right.
like what did you even want in that space? That never came up, much less even knowing the prices of things or even being like, do I want to rent? Everybody says you should buy.
Right.
Is that what I want to do? You know, those sort of things that we're looking for the expert to tell us how to do it. But if we had the practice, maybe we still would want the expert, but we wouldn't have the anxiety, you know, and we would just have a lot more experience with these real life things that we don't really get to learn about until they happen. We learn very reactively typically.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's not just the practice, but the freedom to explore those options. I remember when I first got out of the military and I came back and I wanted an apartment.
Yeah.
I wanted an apartment. That's what I wanted. I didn't want to commit to being there for any period of time. I just wanted, I knew that having an apartment would be less responsibility, and not that I couldn't handle it. I didn't want to.
Didn't
That
want
was
it.
just not
Yeah.
what I wanted.
Yeah.
But once I put a deposit down, I had my apartment number, all these things. I just had a move-in date, everything. And when I got back to Florida, through conversations with everyone else, it made more sense to buy a house. So I built a house. Craziest thing I've ever done. I don't regret it because it was the best experience that I've had with building a house, but it wasn't what I wanted. I could, and I'll say these things, and I want you to take these words lightly because nothing that I feel that I've done in my past have been a waste. But if I could have repurposed the energy and the finances that I put into that house is great and beautiful, and I love it. My parents live in it today, and I appreciate it for that fact.
Yeah.
But I imagine, and I'll do this a lot with previous financial decisions in my past, if I had decided to do what I wanted to do, whether it turned out great or not, I would have something different. I would be one step closer to where I wanted to be.
Yes. Yes.
Not- yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it's okay for us to recognize that this isn't from a place of, you know, oh my God, the regrets or whatever.
No, far.
Yeah, and I think we're all familiar with it. I think we all recognize that sort of thing too. And these experiences really just help us to illustrate it in a way that it can
Yes.
be harder to see when we're living it ourselves, you know?
Yeah.
And articulate it even. Yeah.
And I'll talk about even in the sense of now learning myself. I had to figure it out. I don't like to have to do 30 years is a long time. 15 years is a long time to pay one single bill. Just one, and the house doesn't progress. It doesn't get bigger as you pay on it.
Right.
And this is just my perspective and how I value it or
Yep.
devalue it. But I do love to be able to move around. I do love to be able to experience different places. I love to experience bigger places, smaller places, whatever. But I know that for me to tie to a mortgage wouldn't be the best idea for me right now.
Yeah.
So even speaking to my mother about it, I said, hey, I think I might want to move. And I didn't even say a place. And she said, well, what about if you buy a house? And I was like, that's definitely not what I'm going to do right now again, because I know my spirit says to me that once you're done here, you're going to want to move somewhere else. And I don't want to have to go through the same things that I had to go to get rid of that.
Did Veronica
That
just say her
burden.
spirit said to her?
Yeah,
Like,
absolutely.
let's talk about that, right? That's
Yes.
one of those things that we constantly have to de-school from the idea that if somebody, some person, some guru again, some savior isn't telling us what to do, then we can't make a move. No, we actually have a built-in navigational God self system that we can actually practice listening to. And this is a part of the things that we really try to expose the girls to. They don't have the same connection to it that I do. They still think some of the things that I say are woo-woo, which are totally okay because they don't have to believe what I believe. But then you tell me things about karma, which I didn't know, that we didn't talk about that part at all, you know, or those sort of things to be able to say, what am I feeling? Not what am I thinking? Because they're often different. What I'm thinking is probably the best thing to do is to buy a house because, you know, everyone says this is what you do, and I do know
and financially,
these people.
if you are trying to go in that direction, it does.
Right.
If you're trying to go in that direction, but if you're not.
But if you're not, then that's why the brain and the belly can work in harmony, because even though your brain is saying, yes, this makes sense, your belly can step in, and then together they can decide, and this will also make sense next year. So if I still feel like, you know what I'm saying? And to be able to trust that the same way we would trust Iyanla saying, girl, go do this. And we're like, oh, Iyanla said it. I have my marching orders. We could give ourselves marching orders too.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that was, because we were talking about, just coming back, we were talking about the buying of the house and talking to my mother about it today. And she says, well, where do you want to move and when are you going to move? I said, I don't have a time frame and I don't have a place. I said, I have ideas of where it feels like it would be good to live.
Yeah.
But I don't have a time frame or a space. But my spirit does say that I'm not tying to this again, at least not right now, because in order for me to gain the freedom that I needed to even listen to myself, to even explore and see what I wanted, to untie those knots cost me more than it did to tie. And I'm not just talking about financially.
Right.
Because that's easy. And I tell people all the time, your bank account will go from 0 to 1,000 to something else, back to that, to 0. And who never know? It may never go back to 0. It will fluctuate, in other words.
Yeah.
It will change. That cycle will be up to you. But what damages you do suppressing yourself. Mm-hmm. Suppression comes as is.
Yep.
But suppressing yourself, you're going to have to dig. I read a book and it's almost like a mud hole that a car continues to drive in, and it creates this groove, and it just digs and it digs and it digs. And then you have to eventually you might get stuck, or eventually that hole gets too deep to even drive over. And then that's where all that repair we have to do in order, that self-love we have to give when we've lost how to love ourselves and listen to ourselves and care for ourselves. That all comes from the oppression that we do to ourselves, from not allowing ourselves to feel, not allowing ourselves to want, and even like working in harmony to get those things.
Absolutely.
Because like you said, our mind and our belly sometimes say different things. But at the end of the day, there's a harmony that can happen. Maybe you do want a house.
Yeah.
But do you have to purchase a house?
Right. Exactly.
Can we rent a house? Can we Airbnb a house? There's so many different other options of achieving and even testing out these things that we think that we want.
Exactly. And being okay with that, being okay with testing that out. See, there's so much we're learning. I know learning is happening right here now, and we have no curriculum. And we didn't have a script for the show or anything like that. And I know y'all can hear and see all of the gems that are coming up. So let's wrap, because I want to try to use the next few minutes to wrap up. So yeah, however you want to wrap with the experience and kind of what you observed and want to convey also from it. Okay,
so for me, I think the biggest part I wanted to convey about the experience that I had with the girls was that we facilitate, we don't direct. And there's a difference. You know, we might provide structure, but we don't provide them with discipline. That is an internal thing, and it's something that has to be done internally for us, because you have to have enough discipline within yourself to not discipline them. And I'll tell you, coming from a Southern background, sometimes the easiest thing is to say, shut up and sit down, or a spanking, or to tell them just no.
Yeah, and that's just not discipline. That's breaking somebody down. That is not discipline. You said discipline comes from inside.
Absolutely. Inside. Definitely. It came from them. And I'll show you, and I want to point out a couple things where they disciplined themselves.
Yeah.
I said I wanted to leave at 10 o'clock. They got up at 9. I said you had to eat by 10. They ate. I said we need to be back on the road by 3:30. They were done by 3:29. You know what I mean? To me, that's discipline. Mm-hmm. I said that we have 2 days to complete these things. I want to go to a park. I want us to go out to eat. I want us to pick up these things for your restaurant, and I want us to do a college tour. And within those 3 days, those 2 days, we did that. Yeah. And it wasn't you're going to do this at this time.
Right. You weren't stressed out like, oh my God, these kids, like most people feel. Oh my God, my kids are on break and I'm going to have to that's because you have this really weird relationship where it feels like you're herding sheep, and kids can feel like that no matter what. But if you explore a different dynamic, it doesn't have to feel like that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So for them, I didn't have to govern them. And for me, that was the biggest thing for me, because as a newly unschooled person,
Yeah.
that is actually in school, I have to actually understand how I learn, how I teach, because that's important when it comes to kids. That's the biggest part for us.
Yeah.
Them, it was allowing them to learn on their terms, and me allowing them to learn when learning was learning. It existed for themselves. They learned, and I didn't have to supervise it.
Yeah. Or
I didn't have to
simulate it. A lot of times we feel like we have to simulate an environment like this. Because even if you didn't ask them about the meat, right, that question would come up because they would need to know how much meat to buy. We see it all the time with not just our children, but other children who are in self-directed spaces too. They just do that. That's a human thing. That's not a smart kid thing.
Yes.
It's just a human
It's a survival tool. It's how we survive.
Yeah.
If you think about it, which is every day, it's the basics of surviving, and that's where it starts, but that's not where it ends. It starts at that, because I say survival and then I'm super cautious of my words. It's not just survival, but that's where it starts.
Yeah.
You have to eat. You have to figure out what you're going to eat. You have to figure out how much you're going to eat.
You're also curious. Another survivalist thing is to like go beyond the space that you're in. Because, you know, people say all the time, well, my kids aren't like that. They wouldn't learn if I didn't make them.
Yes, they would.
Yeah, they not only would they learn, like they are compelled to learn. You just may not know what it looks like because you have, and I mean we when I say you. Hey, Cujo, is that Cujo? There we go. That's a part of the problem too. Like we don't know what it looks like, so we assume that if it doesn't look like what we think it should, that the child is not learning, and that's simply not true. It isn't true.
And it's what's learning for them, because you said what it looks like, but what it looks like for them, because as we spoke about, you know, it doesn't look the same for me as it looks for them.
Right.
It doesn't look the same for them. So noticing or being able to acknowledge how your child learns, or any child learns, any person learns, because I apply this to my partnership as well. I apply this to myself. I listen to the reactions that I have to certain things that happen to me throughout the day, whether it's something that I do or something that somebody else does or something that I have no control of. I listen to how my spirit reacts to that and how I feel about it and how I go about actually addressing it, because that matters. To me, it matters.
And those are the things that help you to learn you know, to learn your you-ness. I call those spiritual breadcrumbs because that's what they do. Okay, we came in and out. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm here.
I call those spiritual breadcrumbs because they lead you towards yourself. You know, you can observe that and be like, oh, shit, now I'll lose my shit when that happens. What's going on here? Or, oh, that's interesting. So you really are this beautiful observer. And then a big part of observing for me too is that I don't judge myself as much when I look from the perspective of the observer. So I'm not like, really, Akilah? That's what you did? It's more like, that's interesting that you did that. I wonder what that's tied to.
Yes,
then I'm not beating myself up. It doesn't mean I'm celebrating a certain thing, but it also doesn't mean that I'm beating myself up. It means that I'm learning. That's what.
Yeah, absolutely. Because every reaction doesn't always have to be a negative one, and even though it may even be portrayed to others by negative, that doesn't always equate to negative. And we have to also be aware of ourselves enough, know ourselves enough to know when we are portraying, you know, these negative things, but to also to recognize that this is me. Yeah, this is me, and this is the reaction I have to someone doing something to me, regardless of whether you want to put yourself in that situation again, or if you want to display that to the other person and communicate to them. Children alike. This is not just per adult. Hey, I didn't like when you put on mommy's shoes. They cost a lot of money. You break them. I don't want you to do that. Yeah. Versus, don't ever put my shoes on again.
Or versus hitting because you did the thing and they're like, wait a minute, I play dress up all the time or whatever.
You put your shoes on. You don't. No one hits you. Yes. Because that's how, you know, we learn. We kind of do things that are pretty much. So from this, I took from this, me personally, I was able to allow myself to explore with them, allow them to lead the exploration, and just be there and be aware of what we were doing. Because that's all I was. I was just aware, And I just made them aware of the things that, just a timeline, check-in points. And for the most part, that was our experience. We had a beautiful time those couple of days, and we were able to make a dent in their restaurant planning.
Yes,
we were
a major dent.
Yes. And we talked about the terrain. Marley had spoken about not knowing that Georgia had so many things to offer, i.e. the mountains and the lakes and the housing. Yeah. And, that for her, that's a life skill because later in life, she might not have to go to Colorado to see a mountain. She can go down the street. Yep. And really, that's what it's about. And for me, too, we were looking at moving as well. You might not have to go here. Just explore your surrounding and allow yourself to learn. And from that even gave us, for me, that gave us a little bit of hunger to learn even more. And we stopped by the library. Never have I been to the library in Georgia.
Oh my gosh.
And we we got library cards, and I checked out my first 3 books from the library, and the girls got their books.
Yes, I'm reading one of them now. Sage and I are in a book club together, and yes, it's a good book too. Oh my gosh, where's my book? Oh, I left it downstairs. Yes.
Yeah, so that was one of the things. We ended up our trip. That's how we ended our trip. We stopped by the library. Yeah,
not because you said, hello, children, learning happens in books. Let's go to the library.
No, we went, okay, so how did that come about? So we're going to quick, real fast.
Yes.
We were at the library at Kennesaw State University because we were able to tour the campus, and the girls were interested in the books there. I wasn't sure if we could actually check out the books there because they didn't have ID cards. I did, and I didn't want to have to do it that way, and they may not have the selection that the girls wanted. So I gave them the option. I said, hey, we can stay here and read books here at the library and spend more time, or we can go by a library and find books, and you can take them home with you, and we can return them that way. And they said, well, we want to go do some other stuff, so we're going to go to the library and take them home with us. And that's what we did. At the end of the day, we picked out books.
So they just got library cards, short term, right quick. And we're just going to give the books back to Auntie Veronica before we leave Georgia. So I'll give them back to you on Sunday and ask you to deposit, give them back to the library for us. And
absolutely.
Yeah. And that's it. And so I know that we don't need to do any formal wrapping here because I know you were listening and watching and you heard. I'd love to hear in the comments description some of the things that came up for you as you listened to Veronica connect personal leadership to just being with children, whether they're your children or you're just a part of that village, because it does take all of us to raise Marley and Sage. So I want you to drop those comments in there, whether you are a parent, whether you're a village member, whether you're a caretaker. What are some of the things that came up for you as you started looking at maybe the ways that learning is happening for the children around you and some of the maybe breakthroughs that you're having as you're seeing all the different ways that learning shows up for people, not just kids? All right. Learn more about Veronica at autonomousgrowth.com.
To experience adult unschooling, so to speak, but in my terms, kind of more or less how I'm able to navigate through life and finding myself and creating that space for myself and the people around me. And also showing women how they can do it for themselves and coaching them through that process as well.
Awesome. We learn out loud. That's how my crew is. We learn out loud. We're open to sharing, and we want to create community around these sort of healing spaces. So thank you, Veronica Ashley, for being here.
Thanks for listening to Farrah the Free Child podcast. Like the show? Then show your love or give your feedback at akilahsrichards.com.